Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. If you are familiar with Ravenloft and the Domains of Dread, whether that be through Curse of Strahd or Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, you probably know that the Domains of Dread are isolated domains where there's a villain ruling each one. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not, and the players have to defeat them in a sort of classic, sort of heroic sort of way. Now, as much as I love the Domains of Dread and I love Ravenloft, there is the risk of a sort of rinse-repeat kind of feeling. The players arrive in the domain, the players find out who the Darklord is, the players defeat the Darklord, the players leave the domain, they go to another domain, and the same thing happens again and again. That's not true necessarily of all domains. In some domains, their borders could be open and they could be places that people go to multiple times, or the Darklord doesn't make themselves present until their second or third visit, things like that. But what I also like to do, rather than having just like the sort of villains be the Darklord and the Darklord's minions essentially, is have recurring villains who may hop between domains like the players would do, villains who may appear in multiple places multiple times throughout a campaign. I like it because it makes the game feel more alive and more dynamic, and I think it's exciting for the players to think that if they fight somebody and that person retreats, that person may pop up again at some point later on. A quick disclaimer, I've got a list of 8 of them. A bunch of them are from Curse of Strahd. Now, there's 2 things here. Firstly, if you're not running Curse of Strahd, then you might still be able to use them. You might not be able to. And also, if you ran Curse of Strahd and now you're doing a wider Ravenloft campaign like I've done, there's the risk that some of the people I mentioned, maybe they got killed in your campaign and therefore you can't use them. So it might be that you go through this list and you can't use all 8, you can only use 5 or 6, for example. So just please bear that in mind. Let's get started with number 1. Number 1 is a Curse of Strahd NPC called Escher. He is one of Strahd's consorts. In the Curse of Strahd epilogue, it actually explains that people can leave, and it says with Escher that he might try and establish himself as a Darklord elsewhere. And I really liked with Escher that he was kind of Strahd's least favourite maybe, and in my game during the final battle, Anastasia had already been defeated prior to the final battle, but Ludmilla and Valenta got drafted into the final battle, but Escher got forgotten about, and then, which helped him out because it means he wasn't killed, and then he left Barovia when Strahd was defeated, and he popped up, I had him pop up as a vampire, do you see what I did there? In the Sea of Sorrows, and he was a minor villain there. And I thought that was good fun to have him, and he was lamenting about how, I'm my own vampire now, and my vampire lord before, because I was a spawn under his control, didn't care about me, didn't love me, forgot about me, and things like that. It was quite funny. Number 2, Natalia. Natalia is briefly mentioned a few times in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. She is a werewolf. She has it in for the weathermay-foxgrove twins and for Van Richten. The only art that I found for her is the art from Van Richten's Guide where the weathermay-foxgrove twins are fighting her in her werewolf form, and I found some old art from, I guess, an old edition of Ravenloft, I'm guessing 2nd edition, of her in her human form. And I had this cool sort of setup when my players went to Mordant for the first time. They went to Van Richten's shop looking for Van Richten, and instead they found Natalia and a bunch of werewolves and Alcio Metus from Darkon and a bunch of vampire spawn outside the shop, and then they've got to help the weathermay-foxgrove twins fight them off. If anyone's interested, I even created a very basic map, I would admit, in Dungeon Draft and posted it on Reddit. And I based it on an old Dungeon magazine write-up about Van Richten's shop, which showed the insides, and I tried to match, at least with the ground floor, I didn't do the 2nd floor, but it was a ground floor map. I tried to match the colours, tried to match the layout and stuff. So that's, if you're thinking of doing something similar, hopefully that can help you out. I think if a couple of other people have created Van Richten maps, Van Richten shop maps as well. And Natalia, I'm not a big fan of doing over-the-top accents, but because of her name, I couldn't help but to give her a really strong Russian accent. Think red from Orange is the New Black. And thinking of, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's one of the vampires introduced in Castlevania, the Netflix series, a little bit later on. And I had it that when the battle happened outside Van Richten's shop, she very quickly sees that Van Richten's not actually in the shop. It was a scheme to try and capture or, kill Van Richten. And she's angry at her werewolf minions, being like, "Can't you idiots do basic reconnaissance?" That might have veered into French then. My accents tend to go a bit all over the place. But yeah, she's a great thing there is she could pop up again at some point. I was thinking of either having her stuck in Forlorn, which my players are at now, or maybe the Shadowlands, or maybe somewhere else. Maybe she goes into Darkon and works with Alcio again. Number 3, Vilnius. Vilnius is a Curse of Strahd NPC. He appears in the Amber Temple. I've talked about him a fair few times in videos. It doesn't say this in his lore officially. I kind of made this up, but I said him and his master originally from Darkon, and then they moved to Hazlan, and they were exploring the Amber Temple on behalf of Hazlik of Hazlan. He sort of sent them there. Now, if he's killed in your game, so be it. I had it that he was saved by the players, and when they all left the Amber Temple together, he decided to go back there. And then obviously once with Strahd being defeated, he was able to leave Barovia and, well, originally I had him go back to Hazlan. Hazlik defeated him, but one of the Dark Gifts offers reincarnation, so he reincarnated into a Loxodon, one of the elephant people. And I talk about this in my Part 2 campaign diary when my players went back to the carnival for, I want to say, the 3rd or maybe even 4th time. And they meet this Loxodon wizard who comes across as quite a bit shy and a bit well, I didn't play him as, you know, the way that Vilnius is usually played, where he's a complete scumbag jerk. Vilnius has learnt now he probably needs the players' help to defeat Hazlik, and so he's trying to be friendly and trying to be a bit more confident, but he probably fails in both those things. But I think he's somebody who my players still think about him and talk about him quite a lot, and I'm kind of almost annoyed at themselves that they helped this guy who was really unthankful and really rude and really selfish to them. I think they're kind of thinking, oh, maybe we should have taken him out at the time, and that's going to bite them in the bottom. Number 4, Alcio Metus. This is a risky one because she's actually a aspiring Darklord in the Darkon section. She's one of the 3 inheritors of Darkon. Now in my game, I'm only really using Alcio and Darklords Rex, and Darklords Rex is going to be the sort of inheritor. So Alcio, I had a bit more wriggle room and could have her do other things, such as work with Natalia to try and defeat Van Richten, as I mentioned a few people ago, with the whole battle outside Van Richten's shop. She has it in for Van Richten because Van Richten killed her brother Baron Metus, who is from the older editions of Ravenloft. And I believe the first vampire/monster that Van Richten killed, and was kind of the start of Van Richten's dive into becoming a monster hunter. If you don't want to risk Alcio, if she plays an important part of your campaign, or you want her to appear in Darkon, you could consider somebody else from the Kargat instead. That's the secret police that's, well, I was going to say that, you know, is run by Azalin, but Azalin in my game has disappeared for the time being. It depends on, you know, how you're using Azalin and how the Kargat fits with that. But in older editions of Ravenloft, there were characters called Lady Cadanza and Tavelia, who I think were the leaders of the Kargat in 5th edition as Alcio. So you could potentially have them as like her, you know, right-hand people, and maybe your players bump into one of those 2 or both of them instead. Number 5, Leo Dilisnya. Now this is going to take a bit of reworking, because in the 5th edition lore, he's just a pile of bones in the Wachter house in Vallaki. I read the novel Strahd, Memoirs of a Vampire, and really liked how he was portrayed in that. So in my game, it didn't really come up, but in my game, I had it planned that those bones in the Wachter house weren't his bones. He's actually buried under the Wachter house so there's the map in Curse of Strahd of the cellar. I added an additional room with a secret door where he was trapped there, and essentially probably comatose in a way, because he's not fed on blood for however many years, probably hundreds of years. And I had it maybe planned that he somehow escaped, and depending on how Strahd fits into the picture at that point, if Strahd's still around, he may want to fight against Strahd, but knows that if Strahd remembers that he's there, because he's technically one of Strahd's vampire spawn, he may then turn on the players. Or if it's in a post Strahd Barovia, which is kind of when my players revisit Barovia at the moment, Strahd's no longer there because he defeated him previously, he'll have his own free will. So he could be his own villain, and he could leave Barovia and go elsewhere and cause chaos, or is he going to stay in Barovia? Number 6, an evil wereraven. Now, lycanthropes vary in their alignments. Werewolves are evil, some are neutral, some are good. If you look at the wereraven stat block, they are good. Neutral good, I believe. Yeah, I like the idea that somebody maybe gets wereraven lycanthropy, maybe by accident. It says in the book that Keepers of the Feather, the Martikovs, are very careful about who they give their lycanthropy to, because they see it as like a blessing and they don't want anyone abusing it. And I came up with, for my first domain jam contribution on the Ravenloft subreddit, I came up with this domain idea called Rogueshaven, which is about an evil wereraven thief/rogue. And I just really like the idea of a wereraven who wasn't good, like how the Keepers of the Feather are good, and one who becomes a wereraven and becomes evil, and you can use things like the mimicry ability to trick people and make it easier to like maybe steal from someone or somewhere, or to kill people. Oh, I think he was an assassin actually, not a thief. So yeah, kind of took it to the extreme a bit there. But I'll do the whole, put a link in the description for anyone who's interested in taking that idea, whether you use Rogue's Haven as I've written, or just include an evil wereraven somewhere and want some ideas and inspiration. But I thought that could be a cool dynamic that the players maybe have to try and find and stop and defeat this evil wereraven. One of the keys to the feather gone rogue, no pun intended. Number 7, Patrina, Kasimir's sister. So it talks in Curse of Strahd about how Kasimir, the Dusk Elf, wants to revive his sister Patrina, who was a love interest of Strahd's before he became a vampire and before he met Irina and Tatiana, I should say, and became obsessed with her. And she was also the one who introduced him to the Amber Temple. I think it says that in Rahadin's appendix, right up front of all places. In my game, they helped Kasimir bring her back, and at first she was very thankful and very appreciative and came across as very sort of good or at least, neutral person, but she's evil and she's got her own plans to become a vampire in her own right. I think that's also said in Curse of Strahd. Some people like the idea of, instead of her becoming a vampire by taking the vampire gift in the Amber Temple, she could take the gift that makes her into a lich. That could be an alternative. And my plans for her, I did this whole post on Reddit, again, I'll do the link in the description, is that one time when my players returned to Barovia, she invites them to Castle Ravenloft, which she's now taken over and made her own, explains she's now the ruler of Barovia, and Barovia's kind of belonged to the Dusk Elves originally. It should have been hers the whole time, and Strahd came, took over, it was his, but now it's hers rightfully again. And then she's going to try and sacrifice Kasimir to trigger the vampire gift. And, I hope that it happens and she becomes a vampire, and then she's a vampire archmage. She'll be more challenging than Strahd was, which will work back well because my players are higher than the level 9, 10, which is expected towards the end of Curse of Strahd. They're like level 15-ish now. But if her plan doesn't work, or she doesn't feel safe in Castle Ravenloft, even as a vampire, she may go elsewhere, and then she could potentially revisit and pop up again. And number 8, and this feels a bit like cheating, it's not an individual, it's a group of people, it's Azalin's minions. I did a post on the Ravenloft subreddit a while ago asking people about Azalin's lieutenants and minions from the old lore, because I plan for Azalin to be my campaign's BBEG. And I had some fantastic responses where people mentioned Ebb, his shadow dragon, Axrock, who's a dwarven vampire, Blacksmith, I believe, Samuel, is that how it's pronounced? Samuel Birchwood, who's like this dark paladin blackguard, and there's a whole bunch of others. I'll link to it in the description. You could have some of those pop up and appear in different domains. I do like the idea of keeping lots of them in as a sort of lead up to fighting Azalin. They've got to work their way through all of his minions before then to fighting Azalin. But you might want to use 1 or 2 visiting different domains. I also had a Skull Lord, which appears in, I forget which book it is. If it's not Volo's Guide, it's Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, updated in Monsters of the Multiverse. It's like this 3-headed spellcasting skeleton dude, who I had it that he just turned up in Volkovnia after my players had already liberated Volkovnia, defeated Vlodeska, stopped the zombie sieges, and he was bored of new Darkon with Azalin missing and this Darklords Rex sort of pseudo-fake lich Darklord in Azalin's place, and he's just gone for a stroll into another domain and wants to cause some chaos. You could even just do something like that. It could be a cool thing to just throw at the players, and it could be that was one of a number of lead-ins where my players are very slowly learning about Darkon. Darkon's going to be the last stop in our campaign, or this arc of the campaign, and it's just another nice way to drop that. And that's it for this one. Who would you include? When I was researching this post, I had a quick look through the sort of villains category in the Mystopedia Fraternity of Shadows wiki, and came across people like the Whistling Fiend, who I didn't include in this list because I don't know it very well. I guess there's the Caller as well, the Gentleman Caller, who I did talk about in another video and has had a brief mention in my campaign so far. But who would you include? Is there someone really obvious I've missed? Is there someone from the old lore who could be a good fit? Please do let me know in the comments. And in terms of future videos, I think the next one's going to be, I've teased this a few times, so apologies if I've not put it out sooner, but I think the next one's going to be Markovia. In the 5th edition, my players have visited there multiple times, and in the 5th edition it is sapient animals instead of beast folk necessarily, like the old edition, but I did get neither man nor beast and dive into the older lore and the older information and use some maps of the Mark of Estate in the monastery, which were pretty handy. And I'll talk all about that, the 3 times my players visited Markovia, in a separate video coming soon. Thank you, Mist Wanderers.